The U.S. Navy do logistics in Operation Epic Fury. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So you may be familiar with an image that made its way around social media. Excuse me. That is so gross. I have sailed for many years, and I can say categorically, I have never seen food, if that's what that is, at all. I mean, I don't know what the thing is on the left, and I don't even want to know what's on the right there. I don't even want to know the carrots because I'm not a big carrot eater. that fairly gross. But everyone believed that was the food being fed to sailors and Marines on board the Abraham Lincoln and Tripoli battle groups out in the Indian Ocean. Now, Admiral Daryl Caudle, the chief of naval operations at a media roundtable on Monday up at the Sea Air Space Expo, told reporters that food quality and quantity were meeting Navy standards. He said, quote, "In no way, shape, or form has there been a time wherein, at least in this deployment, where they've not met the nutritional requirements of our menu. All ships had, I'm going to say, in the strike group at least, 10 days of food, and most were over 30 days of food." Caudle also said he had not received complaints about quality. He heard gripes about a meal not being good, but that was a result of individual preferences based on rotating menu options. Now, every sailor at float is going to complain about the meal in front of them, guaranteed. I mean, it's going to happen. However, what I want to deal with here isn't the specifics of whatever that friggin' image was. And by the way, that image was found to be a reused image that was out there on the internet, and, bad work there, USA, Newsweek and USA Today for posting that image without checking it. But what I want to discuss is how the U.S. military conducts logistics today in the Indian Ocean. Now, this is a topic very dear to me. I've talked about it a lot on this channel. I did a story not too long ago talking about how MSC oilers provide fuel. This was from the Red Sea operation. I have done historical looks. I just did one on early U.S. logistics in the Pacific in 1941 to 1942. This looked at refueling. They looked at reinforcements, looked at replacements, looked at repair. It was a big kind of overarching view of this. I did a video over on World War II TV with Woody talking about the first 6 fast oilers that were operating in the Pacific in World War II. And then just recently, I appeared on the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast twice. Once 2 weeks ago, talking about shipbuilding and fleet repair in the Pacific. And then about a month ago, where we talked about fast oilers and logistics in the Pacific. But what I want to talk about here is this situation regarding underway replenishment and refueling out in the Pacific, because I think it's a really important one. So the War Zone just published this article: Iranian attacks change way Navy refuels its ships in the Middle East. The Navy created a commercial, quote, tanker treadmill, unquote, to top off its oilers out at sea, offering lessons that could have larger impacts on operations in the future. Now, specifically, they're quoting Robert Hine, who's the director of maritime operations for the Navy's Military Sea Lift Command. I was just up at Sea Air Space and actually hosted a panel with the commander of Military Sea Lift Command, Rear Admiral Benjamin Nicholson. He was great. And what Rob talks about here is this: Epic Fury has been a PhD course in logistics. So traditionally for 25 years, we've been at war in the Middle East, and that war was effectively fought in the parking lot of a giant gas station. What he's referring to is the base at Bahrain. Iran has effectively shut down that gas station. So we've had to come up with really creative ways of how do we replenish the fleet. Now, I should note, I literally have a PhD in this. This is what my doctoral dissertation was on, which was on military sea lift, specifically the role of the merchant marine in national defense. So when he says this is a PhD course in logistics, you've got me going there, Rob. So let's go ahead and break this down a little bit. Now, I got to be a little bit careful here, because I don't want to give away any operational secrets and anything that's being done currently in the operation. So I'm going to be a little general on some issues, and hopefully in the future, we'll go down and break this down even more. All right. First off, if you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So one of the things that's a must draw at the Sea Air Space Expo is over at what used to be Raytheon's booth. It's called RTX now. And over at RTX, everybody comes walking away with it with a big tube. And in that tube is a poster, and everybody in the world grabs this poster right here. Ships and Submarines of the United States Navy. This is the 2026 In addition, you'll see aircraft carriers, surface combatants, submarines, amphibious vessels, see mine warfare ships, not that many of them, unfortunately. But you'll notice that there's only 2 auxiliary ships listed here, subtenders, and no other ones. That's because the RTX poster lists just commissioned vessels, USS vessels. What they don't have is non-commissioned vessels which are in service. United States naval ships, USNS. And it's those USNS ships, the ships of the Military Sealift Command, crewed by merchant mariners, either in the direct employ of the Military Sealift Command, civilian merchant mariners as they're known, or commercial merchant mariners under contract. This is the chart that everyone should have on top of the RTX, but you got to go over to the MSC booth, Military Sealift Command booth, and pick this up. This is their chart that shows you all the commercial ships. The first thing we do is look at the ships on the left, what's titled the Combat Logistics Force. So these are fleet replenishment oilers. They're of 2 different types, the new class, which is the John Lewis class, and then the oldest class, which is the Henry J. Kaiser class. Ironically, in the Indian Ocean, we have both the newest and oldest vessel there. Then below them, you have the dry cargo and ammunition ships. These are ships of the Lewis and Clark class. These deliver dry stores and ammunition. And then below it, fast combat support ships. There's only 2 of them. Other ships that are on there that are important over in pre-positioning and sea basing, the expeditionary support bases or expeditionary sea bases. There are 2 of them right now out in the Indian Ocean. And then on the right side there, the dry cargo and tankers, the SLNNC Star, and then a fleet of tankers. And we're going to talk about their role here in a minute. So one of the things I always grab when I'm at the Sierra Space Expo is this. This is the Military Sealift Command Handbook, very small little book, but it gives you all the vessels that are operated by Military Sealift Command. Plus I get my chart, my poster, so I can put them up on my wall right over there. You can't see them, but I've got them up right over here. This provides you the little kind of quick cheat sheet on all the ships in the MSC fleet. Provides you a nice little executive summary. It gives you command and control and organized structure. And it gives you a detailed information here on those ships I was talking about. There you have your Kaiser and Lewis class oilers. You also have your Lewis and Clark dry cargo and ammunition ships and your fast combat support ships. I'll actually have a link to this book so you can download it if you want it and be able to take a look at it. It's all on MSC's webpage. So let's talk about geography here for a moment in the Persian Gulf. So here is the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf, Mideast Gulf, whatever we want to call it. Here's the Strait of Hormuz, or as it's being called right now by the Iranian government, the Strait of Persia. That's right, they have officially changed it. So, I mean, we could change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. They can change the Strait of Hormuz to the Strait of Persia. But more importantly, what the problem was is for most of operations since the 1980s in the Persian Gulf, we have operated from bases right in this area. Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, Jebel Ali right here in the UAE, Muscat, Fujairah, Duqm, all those ports are right here. And all of them have come under attack from the Iranians. This is the base at Bahrain, which came under attack by the Iranians. This was used for supply and storage by the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Well, that's no longer available because we have pulled all Navy and Coast Guard vessels out of the region, although we did leave 5 commercial ships in there. And yes, I'm going to keep saying that over and over again because it kind of pisses me off that we could pull everybody out of the Persian Gulf, but not tell the U.S. merchant mariners there that, oh, by the way, we'll be leaving now. You know, good luck to you. All right, so if you lose those bases and you're operating here in the Arabian Sea, then you have got to do logistics a little bit differently, meaning you've got to operate from a base. And really the only base left after you lose this is down here, and this is Diego Garcia. This is one of the reasons why Diego Garcia becomes such an important base for the United States. This atoll out in the middle of the British Indian Ocean territories, the BIOT, is absolutely essential. Now, we usually talk about the airfield here from which we see Air Force B-52s, B-2s, B-1s stage out. That's always the thing. But in particularly here, there is a pier right here and warehouses in which you can offload. Matter of fact, here is an MSC supply ship offloading into the region as we speak. Plus, there's a massive anchorage out here, which used to be full of afloat pre-positioning ships. Ships of Maritime Pre-Positioning Squadron 2, housing a Marine Corps Expeditionary Brigade and an entire U.S. Army brigade and Corps support elements were all staged there. They're gone now. There's basically one ship usually left here in the region. But now the Indian Ocean is being supplied through one forward base, and that is that island right there, Diego Garcia. But you still got to bring supplies to that too, because it doesn't inherently have enough supplies. And that means supplies coming from South China Sea, either from Singapore, from Australia, from Korea, from Japan, from the Philippines, or even coming around Africa here and being sent this way. So this means a lot of distance. Whereas up in the Persian Gulf region, we were operating very short distances here and able to operate very close to Bahrain and these other ports. Now we're going from just, 100 or 200 miles away to 1,000 to 2,000 miles away. And that puts a big strain on your logistics. So the Warzone article focuses just almost solely on fuel, but I'm going to talk about the three things that you need to do logistics at sea. You need fuel, you need food, and you need ammunition. Those are the three things you need. And to do that, you do what's called a UNREP, underway replenishment. This is a sped up version here. It shows you ships coming alongside one of the MSC oilers. I believe this is the Pecos here. And so here you have several vessels coming alongside. And what you see here is the deployment of fuel rigs. Those two hoses right there are going to be used to send over fuel. And then you're also going to see the movement of cargo coming across. So you do what's called RAS and FAS. RAS is replenishment at sea. That is cargo coming across, food, ammunition. And then FAS is fueling at sea. And this sped up kind of version right here gives you the kind of the nuts and bolts of how that's done. Alongside, you're pumping fuel, you're moving pallets of cargo, and this is the way that you keep ships replenished at sea. What you have here is MSC ships have a finite amount of fuel, food, and ammunition on board. And typically what they have to do is run or shuttle between the fleet and shoreside bases. That works great inside the Persian Gulf when you're running to Bahrain and back out to the ships. That's less than 100 miles away. When, however, you have Diego Garcia you have to run to and the fleet's a couple of thousand miles away, that creates a problem, because what you need is what's called station ships, ships that are on station with the fleet, and then you need shuttle ships. These are ships that are shuttling fuel in. So how does the Navy do this? Well, first with fuel, they're using what's called console tankers, consolidation operations at sea. Those are commercial tankers. And in the story, they talk about the fact that the MSC has access to about 15 of these. Some of these tankers are under long-term charter to the United States through Military Sealift Command. These are ships that are chartered out and operate, usually moving fuel from different Defense Logistics Agency bases from the United States to the DLA bases. And then others which are on short-term charters, these are ships that come out of the Tanker Security Program. And what you see here is an MSC oiler, this is the ship in gray, coming up alongside one of these console tankers, in this case, the motor tanker Empire State. Now, when those ships come alongside, the MSC oiler will fly its rig. That's that hose arrangement you see there. And the console tanker has the arrangements fitted to its deck to receive those hoses and be hooked up. Now, the fuel hoses work both ways. You don't have to just pump from the oiler to the tanker. Once they're hooked up, the console tanker, the ship on the left there, the commercial tanker, fills up the tanks on the MSC tanker. And then you're in business. The MSC tanker doesn't have to go into port. It can basically stay at sea. The console tanker comes out, fills up the MSC oiler, and now the MSC oiler can fuel up all the ships that are on station there. That works extremely well. The problem is you need a long chain of those console tankers, because what we're seeing now is those console tankers are coming in. They're not coming out of the Persian Gulf where there's refined fuel, JP5 for jet fuel, that funky fuel that F-35s require, and then the DFM, the diesel fuel marine for the ships. They're going to have to go into the South China Sea, Singapore, or other ports to go get that fuel and bring it out. So this is that endless stream. What we're seeing is commercial tankers coming in. Now, I will note that this could be alleviated a little bit because there are two of those tanker security programs stuck in the Persian Gulf that you kind of left up there. It'd be really nice to have them out now. Also, we used to have some of these console tankers fitted with rigs so that you can fly rigs off them. You would fly out a Navy Reserve team, what was called a CART team, and this was a cargo rig team. They would go out there, man the rigs, and now all of a sudden that console tanker doesn't just receive rigs from either MSC ships or an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers have their rigs too. An aircraft carrier can actually fly a rig. But they can actually replenish smaller vessels like destroyers. But we don't have any of those anymore because we got rid of them, because in the 1990s and into the 2000s, we figured we would never need them again. Fortunately, we started bringing back these console tankers in 2015. The other element you have is food and ammunition. And that's where these ships come in. This is the Lewis and Clark class. These are big, what are called AKEs. So A is auxiliary, K is cargo, E is explosives. And so I know you're saying, why not C, Sal? Well, AC was Colliers, so this is why it's a K. So AKEs actually combine together what used to be store ships and ammunition ships. And they're big monster ships, the AKE. But they, in very much the same manner, they have rigs alongside of them. They even have a refueling rig. They have limited capacity to provide fuel to the ship, so they're kind of like a small tanker in some ways. But more importantly, they have the FAS rigs, both one forward and one aft, so that they can fly over rigs. Plus, they can have this large helo deck here. They can use U.S. Navy H-60s off aircraft carriers or other vessels to do it. Plus, they have an embarked team on board of AS-339 Super Pumas flown by commercial pilots that can be used to do vertical replenishment. So they provide everything you need. So if you have a carrier battle group, what you need is at least one oiler and one AKE. Now, there is a Frankenstein mashup of those two, which is known as a fast combat store ship, such as this, the USNS Arctic. Now, we used to have a lot of these. We used to have, I think, about 10 of these. We got down to 4 of them. Now there's just 2, USNS Arctic and USNS Supply. 2 of them are laid up on the West Coast, the Rainier and the Bridge, which I think should be broken out and used. But Arctic and Supply are used. They combine all 3 of those. They combine the oiler, the cargo ship, and the ammunition ship. Now, they don't carry as much as any one of those ships. Carry roughly about 60% of each, but they jam it together into one hull. And what makes this ship particularly interesting, the Arctic, for example, it was Arctic that sailed with the George Bush carrier battle group around Africa, because the Arctic, unlike the other ships, the John Lewis class, the John Lenthal class, and the Lewis and Clark class, they can do 20 knots, but not for long. And I got to tell you, having been on some of those ships at 20 knots, you don't want to do them very long. Arctic, however, can do 26 knots. It has gas turbine engines. It flies. It moves. And so if you want to do a fast deployment around around Africa, you want a fast combat support ship with you. Now, the problem with the AKE and the AOE is this. You've got to supply them with food and ammunition. How do you do that? Well, we don't have commercial vessels that can bridge to those ships, which means we've got to create that kind of chain across the area. So come back over here to the map showing you the Indian Ocean. So Diego Garcia is out here. Since you're using Diego Garcia as a forward base, MSC, Military Sealift Command, has charters with vessels, showed you some of them on that chart earlier, that provide service. They run cargo out to Diego Garcia on a regular liner service. Since it's not serviced by commercial firms, we have to operate special ships for that, and that allows you to bring it out. But since it's a specially chartered ship, you can put food on it, but you can also put ammunition on it. Plus, you can use some of your other AKEs, maybe not attached to ships in the Indian Ocean, to run out supplies to it. Now, one of the things I should note, while the ships can provide food and ammunition to ships, one of the difficult things they have to do is restock the vertical launch cells on board warships. That can't be done at sea. Now, I know some of you are going to be yelling at the screen right now. Sal, we just did a test with that where we did that at sea. And you are exactly right. Here is one of the MSC AKEs alongside a Ticonderoga class cruiser. But you'll notice up on the bow of the Ticonderoga cruiser, they have mounted this crane so that they can swing over vertical launch cells, swing those cells up and load them into the forward magazine there of the Ticonderoga class cruiser. They can do the same thing on the stern. Well, couple of things. One, we haven't tested it, at least as far as I know, we haven't tested it with a Arleigh Burke class destroyer recently. And second, got to have one of those cranes on board your ship, and they take up vertical launch cells. So, good friend of the show, Ian Ellis Jones, got a job working for the war zone. And so I've shown you many of his charts showing deployments of military forces. Well, here's one he's doing weekly now for TWZ. It shows you the location of U.S. Navy carriers and amphibious groups. And just take a moment here to note something. 3 carrier groups operating in and around the region. The George Bush is coming around South Africa right now. We believe it's actually up further north here, just passing Madagascar up into the region. We have the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group that's out here. We have the Abraham Lincoln Ready Group out here. And then the Gerald Ford came through the Suez Canal and is in the northern Red Sea right now. The Boxer Amphibious Ready Group left Pearl Harbor. It's heading westward, so it's in the Western Pacific. The George Washington Carrier Group is up in Yokosuka. Carl Vincent Group is based out of San Diego, and Iwo Jima is out in Norfolk. There is a miscommunication or not accurate information coming out. Secretary Hegseth, I think, said at one point that we're conducting operations against Iran with just 10% of our Navy. That's not correct. I mean, 3 carriers out of 11, and in truth, it's really 10 carriers because Nimitz is going to be decommissioned, and one of our carriers is in a long-term refueling, that is the John Stennis, and is really unavailable. We're talking about maybe 3 out of 10 carriers. That's 30% of our fleet that's out here, including 2 amphibious ready groups. So it's a lot bigger than you think. And that's just focusing on the big platforms. This is U.S. Naval Institute's Fleet and Marine Tracker as of April 20th, 2026. Here you see Ford, Lincoln, Tripoli, and the Bush Group. So they break this down in some more detail. Here is the deployment of the George H.W. Bush Carrier Battle Group, Carrier Strike Group 10. On board, it has Carrier Air Wing 7 made up of F-18s largely. It has, along with it, the USS Mason as its air defense commander and Destroyer Squadron 22. That is USS Donald Cook and USS Ross. Here you see them replenishing from USS John Lenthal as they were deploying in the Atlantic Ocean. As I mentioned to you before, they actually came around with the Arctic. In the Eastern Mediterranean are 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the Buckley and the Gonzales. They are providing ballistic missile defense in the Eastern Mediterranean, also helping to cover Israel. And then deploying back from the Eastern Mediterranean to the Red Sea is the Gerald R. Ford Strike Group. This is Carrier Strike Group 12. Air Group 8 is on board, F-18s largely making them up. The Winston Churchill is the air defense commander, so you'll almost always see that destroyer with her. And she's joined by USS Mahan, and there are 2 other destroyers that are in the Red Sea, the Bainbridge and the Thomas Hudner. In the Arabian Sea, we have the Abraham Lincoln Group. That is Carrier Strike Group 3. The Lincoln has Carrier Air Wing 9 on board, F-18s, but 1 squadron of F-35Cs, a Marine Corps squadron, the Black Knights. It has for its air defense the Frank Peterson. This is the destroyer we saw that made the run through the Persian Gulf in company Michael Murphy. And then for Destroyer Squadron 21, we have the Spruance, which just recently took down the Tuska. And then we have a fleet of destroyers also out there, the Milius, the Delbert D. Black, the Pickney, the Mitcher, the Michael Murphy, the John Finn, the Rafael Perlata, and an LCS, the Canberra. We also believe that there are 2 other LCSs in the region that are going to provide other protection for minesweeping. That is the Santa Barbara and the Tulsa. And then we have the Marine Amphibious Group. This is the 31st Marine Amphibious Group. It's based on the Tripoli, along with an LPD, the New Orleans, and the Rushmore, an LSD. The reason Tripoli has an LSD with her is because the Rushmore can carry 4 LCACs. These are landing craft air cushion. Tripoli does not have a well deck. The first 2 America-class LHAs do not have well decks, so they're almost always going to be paired up with an LSD that can carry at least 4 LCACs. So that is a lot of naval tonnage. I'm not kidding. I mean, just in terms of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, that is a buttload of Burkes out there. And if you have that many assets out there, you're going to be hard-pressed to provide the logistics for that force. Again, what you have now is 3 carrier battle groups, 2 in the Indian Ocean, 1 in the Red Sea, along with an amphibious group, along with a fleet of destroyers that are doing this. And so what are we going to see? Well, the AOE, this is the Arctic, and the 2 oilers that are out there are going to be running from ship to ship, providing fuel. About every 3 days, you need to refuel. And remember, you got to stagger them because you only do so many ships at a time. And so your oilers are going to be up front doing that. Your AKEs and AOE, and there's at least 2 AKEs in the area along with the Arctic, are going to be supplying food and ammunition to the ships. And so food's getting out there. Understand that the ships leave port with at least 60 days of food on board. Fresh food does start running out without a doubt, but you have frozen food. So you're going through your frozen food, and they are doing the best they can to keep that supply. You're probably running dry cargo ships. The normal cargo ship run to Diego Garcia is probably amplified, increased, and you're probably running an AKE, 1 or 2 of them, to Diego Garcia to deposit ammunition for the fleet there, and ships are pulling back as they need it. Remember, we had the statement from President Trump talking about how the Abraham Lincoln Group shot down 101 drones and missiles at some point. Well, you got to replenish those VLS cells on them, which means you got to go pierside somewhere in the region or out of the region to go do it. We had an example of what happens when logistics is encumbered 2 years ago. So back in September of 2024, this oiler, the USNS Bighorn, ran aground off the coast of Oman. And I posted a video, and I actually wrote a story about this and posted it for want of an oiler. And I actually submitted this as an essay for the U.S. Naval Institute's CNO History Essay Prize, and I got rejected. Absolutely rejected. However, I do have the essay posted over on my Patreon. It's open to everybody if you want to go take a look at it. You don't have to be a member. It's posted over there, and I'll have a link below for you. But one of the things I highlighted is when Bighorn went aground, it deprived the strike group out there, which ironically was the Abraham Lincoln, the same carrier that's out there now, of an oiler. And what did that mean? Well, the Lincoln had to make do with just a single destroyer for escort, while the rest of the escorts had to go to port and leave the Lincoln alone. And for a brief period of time, there was an issue about supplying the Lincoln. Fortunately, there were 2 AKEs out there. I mentioned they have limited fueling capability, so they were out there. But fortunately, we had some console tankers out there, and those console tankers were able to replenish the Abraham Lincoln because the Abraham Lincoln has a refueling rig it can fly over, but only one. And it's a very slow process to fill an aircraft carrier. Yes, I know Abraham Lincoln is nuclear powered. Its planes are not. And that is a long underway replenishment, pumping millions of gallons of jet fuel over. So we had a warning about this. And what's interesting to see right now is how they're dealing with this. I agree with Robert Hine. This is going to be a PhD in logistics. But this is something we should know because we saw this happen in World War II. I've talked about this a lot. Lessons we should learn from wars. Everybody wants to study battles. Nobody wants to study logistics. And logistics is what wins wars every time. Guaranteed. And this is going to be a perfect test case of that. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until our next episode, this is Sal, signing off.